Welcome back, gamers. It's about midnight in my time zone, and my roommates are both asleep. So rather than doing my normal recording, because I have to stay up for night shift on Saturday night, I have decided to do a very quiet, very intimate, playthrough of Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest. I've done one full playthrough of this game. I died. It's just a really excellent visual novel. I really like it. And hopefully the way that I'm managing my voice isn't going to kill it. We'll see if we can do this all in one cohesive video, but if not, we'll make this another short series. So, without further ado, let's get rolling with the new game. I actually did do a playthrough earlier, but I didn't have any of the game audio going to my actual recording, so I'm restarting again. That's okay. The visuals on this are gorgeous. I really don't mind playing it over and over again. This is a game about rage, and how it helps us do things that need to be done, as well as things that we later regret. Sometimes both. How do you feel about that? Well, I prefer to think before I act. So, you're the observant and cunning type. That's okay. There's no right path here, just your decisions and their consequences. Let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them, to play hide and seek. I observe. I watch as they dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. There are words in their dance, but I don't understand them. Not yet. Then they bunch up and fly toward me like an arrow. Rushing down, they're soon upon me, but just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear, and the dark of the night returns. In the darkness, the spirits keeping the forest alive whisper about the enemy. I begin to move, unnoticed, one with the night. And then I wake up. Cold and alone. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. The smell fascinates me. The smell, both fascinating and repulsive, is everywhere. A memory stirs deep in my mind, something elusive from my earliest childhood. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark-leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to the fallen trees. I try to breathe. I take a deep breath and suddenly realize that it's not the forest that smells so foul. It's me. I look down and see my hands covered in a dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face, in my hair. Blood. I'm alert. Nature is never quiet. The leaves rustle in the wind. Small creatures scuttle in the undergrowth. There is a whisper. I don't understand what it means, but the word resonates in my head. Garu. Who said that? There's a severed head right in front of me. I wince and touch it. Overcoming my disgust, I gently touch its wet hair and watch as the head topples over. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open as if the head were still struggling for air. I look at it and I start to laugh, and then eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? I can see their silhouettes, shades of jet black against the darkness. They smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth. Massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn like small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them and something wakes inside me. Defiance. They tell me stories of their lost battles and dying hopes, and I say no. I tell them my stories of the enemy and how they are so stupid, so clueless that we almost feel pity as we kill them. They listen and laugh. I laugh with them. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me. And then I wake up. It's got such a banger of an intro. Chapter 1, Arrival. Dreams. Maia, wake up. I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. I stretched lazily as I assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. I comforted her. It's all right. I squeezed her hand to comfort her. She looked at me, concerned. You were laughing, like, maniacally. I blinked. The memory of the dream was still there, and the taste of blood in my mouth. I was glad I wasn't alone. Thank you for coming with me, I said. The girl next to me smiled. I think we're almost there. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow, I'd managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. She seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really glad we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my cabanossi. Dried, meaty sausages that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visiting... I'll remember the pronunciation of that later. Białowieża National Park with me instead. So far, it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again? Why were we there? There being, let me see if I got it right, Białowieża, a small village in northeast Poland near the border with Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and, according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers in the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been, because I've been dreaming about the forest in Białowieża since I can remember. But people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes. I told her everything. I've always had these dreams where I'm in the forest and it speaks to me, I said hesitantly. I'm not sure why, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Only my grandfather understood the dreams. Respect the forest, he would say, and pay attention to your dreams. It was all I got from that part of the family before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad. I waited for her to respond. I'm trying to go for a very measured playthrough, keeping rage low. Anya was silent for a long time. Wow, that's intense. She looked at me with what seemed like respect. I wouldn't dare tell anyone a story like that. I think it's great that you come from such a magical place. She smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore, and that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything about my future, that damn forest, and my weird-ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months with a clear goal in mind. I had to figure out my destiny. My grandfather's cryptic remarks, the strange dreams, all the drama with my dad's family. Something was coming for me. Something big. I wasn't sure what to believe. I wasn't sure if I believed in destiny, but I needed to understand what was happening. I was ready to face whatever fate had in store with me. But now I wasn't so sure if it had been a good idea. Welcome home. Willpower dropped to 0. When you lose all your health or willpower, you become impaired. This will make physical tasks if you have 0 health, or social and mental tasks if you have 0 willpower, harder and sometimes impossible. Białowieża looked like an overexposed photo of a village with the contrast turned all the way up. It was a hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything, the old trees, the yellowed grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences, seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as though they were freshly printed with the darkest of inks. And they moved. For a second, I could have sworn they moved, but then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I tried to pet it. "Here, kitty kitty," I said, squatting down and reaching toward the cat. It rammed me affectionately with its head and started rubbing against my legs, totally ignoring the outstretched hand. "Hey, Maia?" Anya said, looking at me surprised. "Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us?" But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. "Let's go. I'm tired, and I really, really need to find a toilet." I didn't know what to do. I was too tired and distracted to think clearly. My friend was nowhere in sight. But the meeting was just too important. "Let's just wait a little longer," I said. "I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him." His name was Bartek. I'd met him online while researching Białowieża. The man knew everything there was about local history. I asked him to dig around for anything connecting my family to the forest, or any strange prophecies. You know, I hope he's found something. "I really need to pee." Anya said it like I was a 5-year-old, and not a very bright one. I tried another approach. "You know what?" I tried another approach. "You go, and I'll wait here a couple more minutes and then catch up with you. Have it your way. See you at the B&B. Anya grabbed her backpack. "I really can't wait any longer. Have fun." She winked at me and walked away. So I waited. And the creepy cat waited with me. Bartek was 15 minutes late, flustered and apologetic. It was his dad's company, he explained while catching his breath. He'd had to help him out with some paperwork. He seemed uncomfortable. "I thought you were on summer break," I said, noticing his discomfort. "You said you study forestry." "I do, but my dad has a lot of different businesses. One of them is loosely connected to woods, so he uses me whenever he can," he said as he rubbed his neck. "Fathers." I shrugged. I could understand daddy issues. Me too, everyone. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and he had freckles all over his face. "Come on, I'll take you to your place." His accent was broad and very Eastern European. I flooded him with questions. Luckily, he loved talking about his home, so when I flooded him with questions, he kindly obliged. He talked about how the village had become a tourist destination, how the logging industry had moved to a nearby town, how the trains had stopped coming, and how the local train station had turned into a hotel for wealthy foreign hunters. The dozens and dozens of bison statues scattered around the village watched us indifferently. We walked along the only street in the village, slowly making our way towards the outskirts. The trees were growing denser, their scent becoming richer and more pronounced. I took a deep breath. And I'm going to take a deep drink because my voice is already going. So, What have you found in the way of local folk tales / creepy prophecies / weird shit? I asked. Bartek shook his head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. He looked afraid. What's up, man? I smiled. Spill the beans. I'm a big girl. I can take it. But he just clammed up. You know what? I think you should drop it. I stopped. It was almost too easy. Bartek tensed up, but I shrugged and smiled. Okay, let's go. He looked like I'd pulled the rug out from under him. But you said it was important. He was ready to crack. I got you. I laughed and punched his arm. I knew you wanted to tell me. The game tracks your decisions on how Maia approaches problems. They will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is deep in her heart. The story changes to reflect Maia's personality. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend from the States was looking for her roots and wanted to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He shook his head. I urged him to continue. Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please, I urged him. The tension is killing me. One of the old men here told me to go to hell, the other spat on the ground, and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller. And then my own grandmother told me to stop asking. She said something else as well. I tensed up. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet, golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. Who was I? I looked at Bartek, and I saw the stories he'd heard had clearly strained something between us. He was afraid of me. Who was I? We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that could mean only one thing. I was on the right track. My pulse quickened, and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you regain willpower. I love the art so much. Bed and breakfast. Białowieża had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was the bed and breakfast. That's where we stayed. I found one that was nice, clean, and that had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. Anya was there, already unpacked and chilling in the summer sun. I dropped off my stuff and freshened up a bit. Will you show me around? I smiled at Bartek. Sure. What do you want to see? Before you go, check out your character sheet. Look for it in the upper right corner of the screen. You can find a load of useful information about Maia, her background, personality, goals, and so on there. You can also check who your friends and who your enemies are. So, we are Maia Boroditch, age 24, an American student. I am not very brave. I am not super inspiring or analytical. I am fairly spiritual and pretty cunning. I am in a healthy condition. My goal is to fulfill my destiny. And people were scared when they learned that I was coming to town, and they didn't even want to hear my name. So, Anya is loyal, Bartek is sympathetic, and family is complicated. Who'da thunk? I think we can all sympathize with that, can't we? Let's try and rotate this up a bit so I don't have to be hiding in my microphone. Sorry if that was loud. Okay. Białowieża was a quiet, quaint tourist town, but I had other goals in mind. I asked Anya to go with me. The lay of the land. I had a clear goal in mind. The land was calling me, and I wanted to understand my destiny. So Anya and Bartek went with me. into the woods. It was dark in the woods. Dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of the sunlight. Okay, I'm actually chilly because I've got the AC cranked up, so give me just a second to get a jacket. I'll be right back, gamers. Flannel seems pretty fitting for the woods, right? Or plaid, you know. Okay. Who's Daniel? Oh, I see. Daniel looked at the three of us over his shoulder. How do you like her? We'd met maybe 20 minutes earlier. Bartek had told me Daniel was the best person to go to if you wanted to see the forest, so we found him, and now here we were. I wasn't sure whom he meant. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language that gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean Pusha. Pusha. He gestured around us. The words sounded like the wind rustling in the leaves. Pusha. Pusha is the right word, not forest. Forests are like fields or orchards. Cultivated. He spat as he said it. And Pusha, she is older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it was a name. I looked at the Pusha again. With fresh eyes. I felt as though I'd entered an ancient tomb. Gigantic, dead trunks were decomposing slowly around me, young plants and colorful mushrooms sprouting from them. The trees that still lived stretched towards the sky like columns holding up the vaulted canopy, which blocked out all but a few rays of sunlight. There was stillness, and there was movement, darkness and light. If spirits existed, that place would be swarming with them. I loved what I saw. There should be more places like this, I said earnestly. Or more of this place. Daniel lifted his head and looked me right in the eyes. Yes, you're right, he said with a serious expression. He was a strange guy. Slender, but muscular. Not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun, like tanned leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. Then I remembered why I was there. I told him that I dreamed about the forest. There's a special reason I'm interested in the forest, I admitted. I'm not from here, I continued, but I think something secret connects me to this place. I dream about the forest a lot. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared as though he were tasting the air. Yes, his face broke into a smile. I think our families might have known each other many winters past. Pusha still remembers. Come on, he started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That sounded vague. I bet he told all the tourists that. But I followed him. At the crossroads. We have to choose a path, he said. There's the old wolf den, or I could show you the barrows first. Or a clearing that some folks call a place of power? I'm really drawn to the barrows. Just one small thing. Jackie! One more thing! Oh shit, I broke the quiet. We started walking, but after a few steps he stopped abruptly like he'd remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? He asked. Sure. Yeah, man, sure, what do you need? I smiled. He ran his hand through the moss on a dead tree trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached into his pocket. He took out a small stone. An amulet? Maybe? I felt my hair stand on end, and my nostrils widen for some reason. The smell of the forest grew stronger. I would like you to take this stone. He held out his open hand toward me. And throw it in the direction you think we should go. I did what he asked. Okay, I said, reaching for the stone. I took the stone and closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. I was curious. It was warm, and I felt grounded when I squeezed it. I closed my eyes and thought about the barrows, trying to imagine that place. I thought about the people who'd buried their loved ones in the middle of the ancient forest and of the bodies nourishing it. I threw the stone. I felt my hand rising entirely on its own and then throwing the stone as far as I could. When I opened my eyes, there was a path where the stone had fallen. I hadn't noticed it before. Okay, Daniel patted my back. Let's go. What happened exactly? What just happened? I was confused. You were accepted, he answered with a faint smile before he turned to head deeper into the forest. Bartek gave me a thumbs up. It crossed my mind that the two might have known each other for a long time. The dead hills. The trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed a stream or a gully, but for most of our trek we walked through the dense undergrowth. Daniel was a great guide. He had no compass in hand, no map, yet we were heading dead north, and he moved through the forest with grace and ease, like it was his backyard and he was showing us around. Anya and Bartek followed us, lost in hushed conversation. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles, the ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. I almost felt like the forest wanted us to find the way. And the forest was full of wonders. Walking through the forest, I couldn't decide what to do. I wanted to see, hear, touch, and taste everything. Wild strawberries were hiding in the bushes, fresh and sweet. Leaves glistened with droplets of dew. Snails, pebbles, strange plants, and mushrooms. Armies of ants marching across our path. Everything was a treasure. It was as though the Pusha was showing us the best it had to offer. I resisted the temptation. And now I'm impaired again. I sighed, walking past yet another wild strawberry bush, but I resisted the temptation. Take only when you're in need, Daniel said, catching my gaze. We continued in silence. We'd been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was also looking around more often and had hunched slightly. Was it the barrows? Are we there yet? I asked. He froze for a second, as though he'd forgotten that I was there. They're tricky to find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a minute, please. That was when I felt it. Ash in my mouth, the smell of smoke and wet soil, and a pull. I knew where to go. I think I know where to go, I said, surprised. He tilted his head. Okay, let's check it out. I pointed to the barely visible path on my left, under a dying tree. He followed me, and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead tree trunk and the sponge-like mushrooms, across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different from other parts of the forest, until you noticed the mounds. There was something about the flattened hills that drew my full attention. I could remember. A memory stirred in my mind. No, it wasn't a memory. It was a feeling anchored in my chest, akin to the taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing, sadness, resignation. But there was more. A sense of sacredness. It filled me with a calm excitement, and when I closed my eyes, I saw a fire burning in the darkness. Voices. The village was long gone, its houses burned to the ground, its people slaughtered, but the spirits were still there. They'd accumulated over time, some in ancient Roman armor, some in rags, some in animal skins, some in uniforms from the World War, some in modern camo. Are we dead? Where are we? They asked me with frantic whispers. Is this hell? It was paradise. Just not for them. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. You were somewhere else, he said. You said you had family here? I nodded. I heard that my father's family came from here. I nodded. I don't know much about them, though. He sighed. I don't think you should be here, he said tersely. You're not ready. I didn't feel ready. Yeah, I think you're right, I said and followed him. On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do. It's almost as though it was expected of me. Was this my destiny? The vision was like one of my dreams, disturbing and so real. Was it showing me my destiny? I accepted that thought. I smiled. A bigger picture was finally starting to come to light. I was destined to calm the spirits. The walk back was uneventful. I felt a little tired. The shadows of the enormous trees cooled the sweat on my skin. The taste of ash lingered in my mouth. Head to the wolf's den next. The old den. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. I remembered it, small, twisted, and crooked, with roots sticking out of the side of the hill on which it grew. I knew it was wise. Every bend of every branch held hidden knowledge that was waiting to be discovered. Months before that, when I decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it. Just like I was sure that under its roots I would find a burrow, and a few feet away another one, like two dark eyes gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. Hello, he said quietly. Hello again, I said quietly. Daniel looked at me with surprise but didn't comment. Bartek blushed a little and looked at his shoes. Yes, hello, he mumbled, hands in his pockets. This is the den, announced Daniel. It's abandoned, of course, but still worth seeing. Why was it abandoned? What happened? I asked. Humans happened, Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning his back against it. It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. Nobody knows who the men were, although it was only one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs here, under the roots of this tree. He'd stopped stuttering and seemed to enjoy telling the story. I enjoyed listening. There was something calming in his voice and the way he talked. His slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was with the cubs on that hot spring morning. I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves, he continued. They probably thought they'd been abandoned. That's why they took the cubs with them. Humans have this instinct that makes you try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous. I didn't disagree. When you put it that way, I answered, unsure. I'm not saying it always works out, but the intention is good, and I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The wolf mother used to come to the farm they were at and howl. People went gray if they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly I heard that howl. I knew exactly how it sounded, and I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul. I remembered how the cubs had reacted. They were silent. When she came, we never answered. Young as we were, we understood. There was no going back. Survival was the only law, and despair was a weakness. Maia, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. I felt for the cubs. I just feel for the cubs. I know a little about divided families myself. Oh. Yeah, that usually ended the conversation. Daniel sighed, looking at the tree and the burrow. The cubs were sold to some people in Kainówka, but after a while both of them ended up back in Białowieża with the scientists. They have a station in the national park. One of the wolves, Kazan, was a celebrity of sorts. If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Kazan. He was even on postcards. I kept thinking about the mother. I wonder what happened to the mother. There's something missing from this story. I also felt like she was more important than the story made her out to be. What kind of wolf was she after all of that? That's a good observation. She eventually stopped looking for her cubs. She came back to the forest and found new children. There was a slight gust of wind and the tree creaked. I remembered that sound from my dreams as well. A sound that made me feel safe. What happened to Kazan? And what happened later? I felt like I knew Daniel well enough to ask that. Is Kazan still alive? He lived for 8 years in the park. Daniel looked at me with his yellow-green eyes. Until they let another male wolf into his pen. I held my breath. They fought over the she-wolf, and Kazan lost. Bartik shook his head. It was human neglect. They should have known what would happen. Anya looked up from her phone. I've read about that. She looked upset. They didn't notice he was wounded. It took him 3 days to die. Daniel shrugged. He lived a long life and died fighting. It was good. We fell silent. He looked at the burrows for a long time. This place is my friend, so I try to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? I could relate to that. I think I understand. Everyone had their destiny. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. I also said my goodbyes. And we left. It's very hard for me not to take a very spiritual route in games like this because I am the kind of person who, despite generally living in the city and being comfortable with it, like, I adore nature. I adore the forest. It's so pretty. I love it. Between the trees. The forest was alive around us, vigilant but not alarmed by our presence. I kept thinking about the stolen cubs. And now we go to the place of power. A buzzing in my ears. It started with the hair on the backs of my hands rising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves in the tree trunks turned yellow and my skin started to prickle. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except a low buzzing that was filling my ears. I couldn't think. Words appeared and disappeared in my head faster than I could notice them. I had to do something, snap out of it. I took a step back to assess the situation. I looked around and noticed there was a clearing nearby with some kind of wooden construction in it. There was also a shadow, a silhouette of a person moving slowly, deliberately. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. There were double-trunked trees between the rocks and an angular wooden construction that stuck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it. But more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving in the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. It was hypnotizing. I looked at him for a moment, at the way his muscles danced under his tanned skin, trying to trace his movements. Before every grand gesture, every stretch, and every push, there was a micro-movement, an impulse from his core, but I could feel it was even deeper. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in rhythm with his steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth seemingly without my knowing. What did he do? What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. He stretched his hand towards me. Oh God, a German accent. I'm Cornell, he said with a hard German accent. Man, can I do a German accent? I could do like the really flamboyant, like, oh Hans, don't you know? But I don't really like that one. So I'm just gonna not give him an accent. Sorry, guys. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there, don't worry. They were cutting down trees in this forest? Wait, logging? Here? I couldn't believe my ears. He smiled bitterly. Yes, logging here. That's why I needed to calm down. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. And they have good reason to, Cornell added. Look around you. So I looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornell's traces, a beautiful pattern on the ground, but there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. The boulders around us were strange. These rocks, someone brought them here, right? I asked, looking at the boulders, which upon closer inspection formed a circle. The stones were irregular and nestled deep in the ground. People believe this was a place of worship thousands of years ago, hence the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there's a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? Yeah. Yeah, I felt it, I said without enthusiasm. The Pusha is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here, the call is louder. You see, the logging, his eyes darkened, is slaughter. Anya gasped quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive, but still profitable, especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt. The wound is getting bigger, as is its desperation. What did the forest want me to do? I frowned. I need more time to figure this all out, I murmured. I was sensitive to what was happening here, so maybe I should use that and pay attention. Maybe the answer was hidden somewhere in the forest. Cornell regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection to this forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Bartek rolled his eyes. Maybe he could help me with the dreams. I looked him over for a moment. Hey, did any of you maybe have strange dreams about the forest before you got here? He looked at me, a look of concern in his eyes. As I said, you seem to be connected with this forest, and very sensitive to the things that are happening here. Pay attention to your dreams, especially tonight. This place is known to communicate in that way. He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower and the bike I'd noticed earlier. Die Schwalbe is getting restless, he said. And, as Daniel pointed out, I should be on the logging site setting up the protest. Schwalbe? Schwalbe? What is a Schwalbe? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow, Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Cornell grinned. Oh, I do. Nice meeting you, Maia. So, the forest was speaking to people. I gotta do some vocal coaching to figure out how to do this without roughing up my voice. So, the forest was in need, and it spoke to people in their dreams. Was it my destiny to answer this call? We went on through the greenery. The buzzing in my ears slowly decreased. We made our way back. The first evening, the B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back, smiling and a little flustered. So, what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. What made the biggest impression on me? I think the place of power, honestly. I felt this strange enemy in the place of power before we met Cornell. It still freaks me out. Cornell seemed cool, though, Anya answered, and he seemed to really understand what you were going through. The wolf cubs that were kidnapped and died in captivity, I sighed. That story stayed with me, you know? She put a hand on my arm. Divided families, huh? It's okay, Maia. I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I went to check out this protest people were talking about. Maybe we should go there tomorrow. Something strange happened when I was visiting the old barrows, I said, and instantly regretted it. Never mind. I was probably just dehydrated. Yeah, it was probably it, but you looked weird. She laughed nervously. A lot of things were weird today, if you think about it. Do I want to gossip about Daniel? Let's see what she thinks. There's something strange about the forest guide. I tried to put my finger on it. He acted like he learned how to be human from a book he didn't understand. I know, right? Maybe it's the isolation. It seems he spends most of his time in the forest. I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I am seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, writhing roots into my chest and stomach. I lay there for some time, looking at the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. So much was happening here. I could feel everything boiling, lots and lots of threads intertwining. I was one of these threads, and my role would soon be uncovered. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I should go and see the logging protest, find Cornell, and make him talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors. I drifted off. Ouch. A black cat stands directly in my path, its eyes shining in the moonlight. It looks right at me, waiting. I tremble. Something is coming. It's huge and monstrous. A seed or a cub? What a strange way to think of it. Cub. I am a wolf cub, like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will grow, and my fangs will become sharper. I will taste blood. I feel a pull, and I surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly they are just trees and tree trunks. I weep. And other voices join me, terrified and hollow. The trees are dead, and I'm here to help console their spirits. There's a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirling chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. I turn to the forest for answers. The dead don't hold answers, and neither do the machines. I walk between the trees, trying to hear their wisdom. They whisper to me, telling me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other, an old, sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful, rotting stench. I know that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. I give them my blessing. I spill my blood and bless them with words that I do not recognize but that I understand. They come down to me, and their voice is the voice of the Pusha. Come here, cub. We have great things ahead of us. I wake up. Alright, my voice is starting to go, so I'm going to go ahead and save chapter 2 for the next episode. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Despite how rough this is on my voice, I actually really enjoyed doing this. So I'm probably going to pick up some more visual novels in the future and do just these real calm, slow... I don't want to call it ASMR because I don't know if my voice is cool enough for ASMR. But yeah. So yeah, thank you all for joining. Welcome to the cult, and I'll see you next time.